Okay, I want to make sure my audio's on. Test. This one's not on. Give me a sec. All right. So what? Let's take a look at here. Where is that? Okay. All right. I guess I'll use a different program then. All right. So we're going to be learning about tissues. Ooh, that doesn't look good. No. Okay, so we're going to be learning about tissues today. Tissues, what the definition of tissues is when a group of cells perform a common function. Okay. And there's 4 types of tissues that we'll be learning today. Okay, 4 types. General types. There's actually a lot more than 4. First one is going to be epithelial tissue. Okay. And you'll notice that I wrote epithelial tissue. Okay, epithelial. The suffix over here, it shows you that it's an adjective. Okay. You could also just say epithelium. And this one is a noun. Okay, so that's the difference between the two. If you were to use epithelial, since it's an adjective, you must have the tissue part of it as well. Okay. So make sure you do it one way or the other. Either one's fine on the exam, if on the quiz, lab quiz 1. The second type is connective tissue. Okay. And the third type here is going to be muscle tissue. And the fourth one, it's going to be nervous tissue. Okay. And each one has its own function. Depending on which type of epithelial tissue, they'll have different types of functions. Depending on which type of connective tissue, they'll have its own function and so on and so forth. But generalizing, if we're generalizing, epithelial tissue usually covers around organs. And since it's covering around organs, it's either for protection purposes, but it also can allow things to go into the cells or come out of the cells. Things that go into the cells, it's called absorption. Things that are going out of the cells, it's going to be called secretion. So it just really depends on the type of epithelial tissue we're talking about. Okay. Connective tissue, there's so many different kinds of connective tissue. So there's going to be actually a lot of different functions for it, just depending on which type we're talking about. But muscles in general is going to be causing contraction. So kind of provide some sort of movement, and nervous tissue in general is for communication. Okay, so I'll be going over the different types of epithelial tissue for right now. Okay, so this is the different types of tissues right now. Okay, so let's look into just epithelial tissue. So if we look at epithelial tissue, there are a couple ways to kind of categorize it. So if we're talking about epithelial tissue, epithelium. Epithelia is plural, epithelium is singular. There's two types of categorization. One is by layers, number of layers. So with this, we want to see how many layers there are. Remember, epithelial tissue, it covers the organs, right? So some of it could be only one single layer of covering. If it is only one layer, we're going to say that's simple. However, if it's two or more layers, then we're going to say this is stratified. And if you think about it, okay, this kind of leads to its function. Form and function are always hand in hand together. For simple, since it's only one layer, let's think about it. Is it easy or harder for things to pass through this one single layer of cells? Or is it the stratified, is it going to be easier or harder? So for a simple with only one layer, is it going to be easier or harder for things to pass through it? Very good. Most of you have said that it will be easier, and that's correct. Since it's only one layer, it just needs to pass through that one layer to be able to go through it, right? Good. However, so this is makes it easier for absorption. This is to bring things into the cell / secretion. Secretion is bringing things out of the cell, okay? This goes in, absorption goes into the cell, secretion goes out of the cell. So you might be thinking, okay, for stratified, if that's the case, stratified, since there's so many layers of it, what might be one function of it, just so because there's so many layers of it? Well, if you think about it, since there's so many layers of it, it could afford losing some of the layers and still have enough of it to protect what's underneath it, right? So for stratified type of epithelia, they tend to use it for protection purposes. So that's number of layers, right? And then there's other ways to kind of categorize this, okay? Besides layers, oh, I forgot to mention, so there is one more type of a simple type that doesn't really fit in this. I mean, it is still a simple one, but it's like a subcategory of the simple one, okay? It's called the pseudo stratified columnar epithelium. Okay, anybody know what pseudo means? What does this prefix mean? Yeah, it means fake or false, okay? It means fake or false. So if you look at this, it means that it is fake or false stratified, meaning that it looks like it's stratified, but in reality, it's actually one single layer, okay? If I were to show it to you, and let me just kind of redraw this, okay? So this pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium, it looks like multiple layers. I'll draw the nucleus or nuclei. It's going to look something like this, okay? You'll be like, it does look like multiple layers in this case, right? Since the nuclei are on top of each other. However, in reality, this cell here it touches the basement membrane. The basement membrane is on the bottom of the tissue here. And this cell over here is just the same. It's still touching the basement membrane here. Okay, it's just slightly angled in a different way here. Okay, so this is what it actually is like. It looks like multiple layers, but in actuality, all of them touch the bottom here, the basement membrane. And this is why it's called pseudostratified columnar epithelium. The one that we'll be learning will have these extra structures on top. The extra structures on top will be moving. As it moves the mucus towards our throat. This is called the cilia. Okay, when we have more than one. Cilium for singular, cilia for plural. Okay, so this is a pseudostratified columnar epithelium. So that's one way of categorizing this. Here's another way of categorization. Okay, is by its shape. What does it look like? Okay. So one of the shape is if it's flat. If it's flat, then we call this squamous or squamous. Okay. So what you'll see is that the cell looks something like this. Okay, it's going to be very flat. The next one that we'll learn is cuboidal. Okay, cuboidal means that it's, oops, let me just erase that real quick. Great, it's not what I meant to do. I'll just do that. Okay. All right. So cuboidal means that it is same height and width. Okay. It's not going to be exactly the same height and width. It will be very similar though. So sometimes you'll see something like this. Okay. This little black dot in the middle is the nucleus. Okay, nucleus. Once again, it's not going to be exactly the same width and height, but it's going to be pretty close. However, if there is another one that's taller than it is wide, then we call that columnar. And columnar will look something like this. I guess the nucleus is, let me point it to it a little bit closer, this little dot. And then there's one other one. It's called transitional. It's called transitional because it changes shape. It changes shape depending on the circumstance that the particular organ is in. If it's relaxed, the shape is kind of roundish. So it looks something like this. If it's stretched, then it's going to be flat. Okay, so it'll look similar to the squamous kind of thing. But they transition between the two if it's relaxed or stretched, basically. All right, so these are how we're going to be categorizing some of the epithelial tissue here. Let's go ahead and look at the specific types of tissue. Okay, I'll repeat the transitional one. Okay, transitional, it depends on the situation that the organ's in. If the organ is relaxed and there's nothing filling it, okay, I will give you an example. The urinary bladder, right? The urinary bladder has urine inside of it. If it does have urine, then the bladder is going to be stretched out. If it's stretched out, it's going to be flat like this. However, if we just urinated, and there's no more urine in the urinary bladder, then it'll be relaxed. If it's relaxed, it'll be rounder in shape. I'm talking about the cells that are towards the top part of the tissue. Okay. Speaking about top parts of things, since most of the epithelial tissue, they are covering things, right? If it is a hollow organ, like your stomach, like your small intestine, large intestine, your urinary bladder, that hollow space inside those organs is called the lumen. Okay, lumen. Of course, if we're talking about the skin, then it's the outside environment. Then you can't really call it the lumen anymore because it's actually the environment. But if you're talking about the internal organs and that hollow space inside your whatever organ you're talking about, then we call it the lumen. Okay. All right, let's take a look at the specific types of epithelial tissue now. Okay. Okay, let's look at simple epithelial. Okay, simple epithelia. Okay. What does simple mean? How many layers for simple? Yeah, very good. Just one layer. Okay. So if we say simple squamous epithelium, we're saying that there's only one layer. Squamous meaning what? Yeah, that's flat. Okay, so here, if we were to take a look at it, it's going to look something like this. Okay, so if we were to draw it out, it looks something like this. Okay. Yeah, it's only one layer of tissue, and that single layer of tissue would be flat cells. Okay. So with this, if this is the base of it, right, and this is the space over here, what's this space called here then? What's this space called? Very good, it's the lumen. Okay, good. So for epithelial tissue, you want to look for that lumen or for that space. It doesn't always occur, but for most of the organs, it will have this space for you to look for and therefore determine that, okay, I know this here is an epithelial tissue because there's the lumen. And since this is covering the organ, this will be an epithelial tissue. Okay, not only will you need to identify the tissue, you'll need to identify an organ, one organ that contains this tissue. So here are some organs that will contain simple squamous epithelium. One are the capillaries. And let me just use a different color just so that be more obvious. Okay, capillaries are the smallest of all the red blood cells. I'm sorry, it's the smallest of all the blood vessels. Okay, and this is where gas exchanges are occurring, which also makes sense, right? If we're talking about simple squamous epithelium versus simple cuboidal epithelium versus simple columnar epithelium, which one out of all of these will have the easiest for things to pass through? Will it be the simple squamous one, where they have flat cells? Simple cuboidal ones, where they have kind of squarish or cuboid cells? Or simple columnar cells, where they have very tall cells? You know, simple squamous will be the easiest. So for capillaries, this works the best because We could transport nutrients, transport waste, transport oxygen, transport gas through these cells a lot easier than all the other types of epithelial tissue. So we'll find this in capillaries. We'll also find this in the lungs. And in the lungs, we have these structures called alveoli or alveolus. Okay? The alveoli or alveolus are these sacs within our lungs so that we could get the oxygen when we breathe in and dispose of the carbon dioxide as we breathe out. Okay, another one, the serous membranes. I think you'll talk more about the serous membrane in lecture, so I'll let Dr. Otu Konyang to explain more about that. But these membranes, they cover our internal organs, whether it's the heart, the lungs, or the abdominal pelvic organs, okay? They're there to prevent friction from occurring, so whenever our heart beats or whenever we're breathing in, it doesn't cause friction to occur. Oh yeah, we'll definitely have some overlap. Definitely. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's going to be talking about all this all over again, but I'm just doing the lab portion of it and showing you pictures for you to identify. You'll hear this pretty much almost verbatim with him as well, kind of thing. Okay, so this is the serous membrane, and also we find it in the kidneys as well. In the kidneys, we have these structures called the glomerulus or the glomerular capsule. But for right now, if you say kidney, I'm totally cool with that. So these are all different organs you'll see this simple squamous epithelium. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Okay, you should be able to tell if I were to draw this out like this, okay? Okay, and this is the lumen over here. So what type of tissue is this? Let's be a little bit more specific, right? I want you to write out the complete term, right? Don't just put only one partial of it, because if you put one partial in it, you won't get full credit, right? So you want to make sure you put out the entire term, right? So the entire term will be, like most of you have already put down, or some portion of it, simple cuboidal what? Epithelium. Okay, make sure you put the entire term. If you only put a portion of it, you might not get any credit, depending on how much you put. Remember, spelling counts as well, so make sure you practice spelling all these over and over again to get it perfect. Okay. Yes, this is simple cuboidal epithelium. And with simple cuboidal epithelium, you're going to end up having, you'll be able to see this in the kidneys. Okay, in the kidneys, these are called renal tubules. But once again, if you say kidneys, I'll be fine with that for now. Eventually, we will learn the different renal tubules and stuff. Ducts. And also in the thyroid. Okay, let's go on to the next one here. The next one will look something like this. Okay, and here's the lumen again. So what type of tissue is this now? Very good, okay. This is the simple columnar epithelium. Very cool, okay. And with the simple columnar epithelium, you're going to end up having something, you'll be able to identify this in what we call the gastrointestinal organs, the gastrointestinal tract, sorry. Gastro, so I'll just write the term gastrointestinal tract. And you could write this, but let me just kind of dissect the word out. Gastro means stomach. Intestinal, of course, you know it's the intestines. But on the quiz, let me know what kind of intestine we're talking about. In chat, show me what type of intestines do we have. What type of intestines do we have? Yeah, we have large and small. So you'll put either large intestine or small intestine. Any of those will work. You also find this in the uterine tubes. The uterine tubes has many different names: fallopian tubes, oviducts. You also find this in the bronchioles as well. For the most part, I may end up showing you the small intestine as the slide. And let me redraw one of these cells, okay? If I were to redraw and magnify it, it's going to look something like this. You'll notice that there's these little microscopic structures here. And these microscopic structures will increase the surface area. Okay, so these structures will increase the surface area. And the reason why it increases the surface area is so we could get even more absorption to occur here. And these structures are called the microvilli. Okay, microvilli. Every so often, within the gastrointestinal tract, you're going to also see these structures right next to it. I'll color in a different color here. They look something like this, okay? And they're kind of like these clear portions here. Okay, and these clear portions are cells called goblet cells. Goblet cells. And the goblet cells, they secrete mucin. Okay, they secrete mucin. Secrete, once again, is to give out of the cell. It goes out of the cell. Secrete mucin. And you might be thinking, oh, that kind of sounds like mucus, and you're right. Okay, when mucin mixes up with water, it's going to make mucus. Okay, and the mucus in this case will help protect the lining of the gastrointestinal tract, because there's a lot of enzymes and a lot of acid potentially, so it helps protect that layer. Okay. So if I were to draw the microvilli, it's going to be a very small layer here. Okay, you could barely see it. It's just a little bit darker in color kind of thing. That's the microvilli. Okay, one more, and we kind of mentioned about this earlier on. This is the pseudostratified columnar epithelia. And the pseudostratified columnar epithelia, it looks like multiple layers, but once again, in reality, they all connect to the basement membrane here. Okay. And I don't know if you remember, there were these little structures, right, that comes off of it. What are these structures that come off of this and moves the mucus? Yeah, very good. It is the cilia, okay? So you'll see these cilia, you'll still see some of these goblet cells because they do end up making mucin again, okay? So there's still going to be some goblet cells here as well. And where would you find this? You'll find this in the trachea. You'll find it in the bronchi. So you'll find it in multiple different areas, okay? So trachea, you could say bronchi. Okay, and so for this one, since there's cilia on it, you could say it's ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelium. So you can add this word to it if you want. Yeah.
Sorry, I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
So are you saying the cilia are found in the trachea and bronchi or the goblet cells, or is it all the same thing?
Yeah, good question, actually. So the trachea and bronchi will have this ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelium. There are pseudostratified columnar epithelium that don't have cilia on it, but you don't need to know those ones, okay?
Okay.
So I just want you to know this ones that do have cilia on it. And since it's part of the respiratory tract, they will have goblet cells inside of this type of epithelium. So the mucus is there to catch dust particles and whatnot, bacteria and whatnot. And then it's going to bring, the cilia is going to bring up the mucus towards our pharynx. Our pharynx is our throat. Once it brings it to our throat, that's when we cough it out, or we could swallow it if you end up swallowing the mucus, basically. What's the difference between cilia and microvilli? Good question, okay? Well, they have function, form and function again, right? The cilia are a lot longer than the microvilli, and the cilia is to move things across it. It's going to cause movement of things across it, okay? In this case, it's mucus that it's moving. If it's a single cell organism, the cilia is going to help it move in the water, okay? Microvilli, on the other hand, is totally different. It's actually not a protein structure. It's actually extensions of the plasma membrane. And since it is the extension of the plasma membrane, it's going to increase the surface area of the plasma membrane so that we could have more absorption or more secretion to occur. So microvilli is to increase the surface area so we can have more secretion or more absorption. While cilia are like these protein structures on the surface of the plasma membrane that moves things across it. All right, so that's the simple epithelia. Let's now take a look at the transitional epithelium, okay? So, sorry, did I say transitional? I meant stratified, stratified epithelium. All right, so with stratified epithelia, what you want to be looking at is how many layers are there, right? Stratified means that there's multiple layers. But you also want to look for where is the top layer, where's the apical layer of this epithelia, okay? So what you want to be looking for, and let me draw this out for you, okay? So this will look something like this. I'm not going to keep drawing too many layers. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, those don't look flat. And you're right, they don't look flat. But what you want to be looking for are the top layers here and see what is the shape of the top layers. Okay, so here's the lumen. Okay, we could tell that this is multiple layers, right? But you're going to be looking at the shape of the topmost layers to see what is the shape here. So over here, this is the stratified squamous epithelium. Okay, I'm going to be drawing in the nuclei in this just because I'm going to try to emphasize something in the second. Okay, so all this have nuclei. Okay, the reason why I put these nuclei there is because there's two types of stratified squamous epithelium. Okay, there is the, in this case scenario, the non-keratinized. Non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. I know it's a mouthful, okay? So this non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelia, if you look at the topmost cells here, since you could see that the nucleus are present, these are alive, okay? They're living. If they're alive, they don't have keratin inside of them. Keratin is a type of protein, and it's going to make it more durable and to help it with protection, preventing from water loss, but it's not going to be able to, it's going to end up causing it to die off. Thank you. I was going to type it in, but you beat me to it. Thank you. Where will we find these? Okay. The non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium, we'll find it in the oral cavity. We'll find it in the esophagus. We can find this in the vagina and also in the anus as well. And let's think about it. We already said that stratify helps with what function? What's one of the functions of having it stratified? Yeah, for protection. Why do we want to protect our oral cavity? Like, okay, good. Okay, protects them from infections, protection to prevent bacteria. Since we have multiple layers, it's going to be harder for bacteria to pass through everything. But beyond that, beyond for protection for bacteria, it's also protected from eating, like someone was mentioning. How does it protect us from eating? Well, when we're eating things, right, food is rather dry. And when we're eating, it's going to rub against our oral cavity. It's going to tear off some of that epithelial layers and stuff. I'm sure all of us either ate cereal that's like Captain Crunch that tears up your mouth, or like chips and stuff like that. And or really hot temperature foods, and it's going to end up tearing up your mouth in that sense. So this is help with that protection, basically. Esophagus, same thing, right? Because at this point in time, yes, we have saliva to kind of moisten it and lubricate it and stuff like that, but it's still rather dry still. So the esophagus is coated with this stratified squamous, this non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelia to help protect it. So with the vagina, on the other hand, well, we're not putting food up the vagina. Well, I guess it depends on, and anyways, what I'm trying to get at with the vagina is more for sexual intercourse purposes, right? It's also potentially for the birthing process as well, right? Kind of thing. So as the baby is going through it, it protects it, the vagina, because it's going to cause friction to occur for sexual intercourse as well. That might be that is also another reason why there's this stratified squamous epithelium. All right. And then the anus. The reason why the anus is also has this layer as well is later on when we learn about the digestive system, as we're eating foods and stuff like that, in the small intestine, what it does, it absorbs all the nutrients, but it not only absorbs the nutrients, it's going to end up absorbing a lot of water in the small intestine. The large intestine, yes, it's going to absorb a little bit of nutrients, but not so much, but it's going to further absorb the water that we consume. So what's going to happen to the feces then as it's going through the small intestine and in the large intestine, and we keep on absorbing that water, the feces is going to get drier and drier and drier. And so hence, once it gets to our anus over here, we want to make sure we have this extra protection so to protect it from the very dry feces as it's going through. All right. So that's one type of stratified squamous epithelium. The other type of stratified squamous epithelium is called keratinized. Okay, oops, sorry, there's an E there. With keratinized stratified squamous epithelium, this is when there is keratin, this protein inside the cell. Yes, it makes it a lot tougher and makes it waterproof, but it's going to cause the cell to die off. So although we still have this kind of type of structure that we saw earlier on, I'm going to just draw fewer cells just for my sanity. What's going to end up happening, eventually, all it is going to be something like this, okay? So let me redraw the nuclei in this. So nuclei, 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 nuclei. All these are nuclei. But you'll notice that I'm going to stop drawing nuclei on the top now. The reason why is because these are all keratinized, so these are now dead. So you don't see any more nuclei. Yes, it makes it tougher. It makes it waterproof, but now these are dead cells on the top. Yeah, and you find this exactly like someone just put on the chat here. You find this in skin. Okay. All right, so next one here. If I were to draw it like this here, let me see if you could be able to identify. Okay, just that's it. That's all I'm going to draw. Okay, so what type of tissue is this? If I were just to leave it like this here. How many layers are there? Yeah, there's 2 layers, meaning that it is, if there's 2 layers, it's going to be stratified, like people are putting on. Very good. And what's the shape of the topmost layer here? Yeah, cuboidal, very good. And it is an epithelium because, like we said earlier on, it covers something, right? Here's the lumen. Here's the lumen. Notice how I didn't put lumen on the skin part because it's not really a hollow organ, right? It's covering the surface of our skin. Okay, where do we find this stratified cuboidal epithelium? Well, we could find it in sweat glands. We could find it in the ovaries, called the ovarian follicle. So if you put ovary, that's fine, ovarian follicle. We also find this in the testis as well. Yeah, testis is singular, testes is plural. Oh, by the way, for this The only time you use keratinized and non-keratinized is only for stratified squamous epithelium. All these other stratified ones won't have keratinized or non-keratinized. All right, so let's take a look at this next one here. And although this next one, I'll let you know, I don't think I have this term on the study guide, but I just want to at least show you it, okay? Stratified columnar epithelium. And for stratified columnar epithelium, they may start off something like this, but later on it will look something like this, okay? So you know stratified, it's 2 layers, right? Or it could be 3 layers, just few amount of layers. But the outermost layer here on the lumen is going to be columnar, right? All right, so the reason why you don't have to know this one is because it's pretty rare in our body. It's in parts of the male urethra. And it's also in very large ducts of the salivary gland. And since it's so few of it in our body, we're going to disregard this. Okay, so don't worry about this particular term. I'm going to just put a big X over here to let you know you don't actually have to know that one. Okay. And lastly, there's that transitional. And transitional, we kind of talked about it before already. Okay, I'm going to just draw it more or less here. It'll look something like this. And I'll draw the nuclei just so that you can see. Okay, and okay. So this is transitional epithelium. And transitional epithelium, remember, it looks rounder in shape if it's in its relaxed form, right? When it's relaxed, it'll be rounder in shape, right? Rounder. If it was stretched or distended, then it's going to, instead of look like that, it's going to be kind of flat instead. So you might be wondering, well, how am I supposed to determine the stratified squamous epithelium from the transitional epithelium, right? And my answer to you is, so this is flat. My answer to you is that most likely I'm going to give you a picture when it's relaxed, okay? Okay, most likely I'm going to give you a picture when it's relaxed. So that way you don't confuse yourself with the stratified squamous epithelium. The other thing, the other clue you want to utilize is every so often, not all the time, but every so often, the nucleus could be, the cell could be binucleated. What does binucleated mean? Bi meaning that there are 2 nuclei, nucleated nuclei. Okay, so that's what you want to look for as well. Okay, not all of them will have binucleated cells, but every so often there will be one. Okay, where would you find this transitional epithelium? Well, we did mention one, right? Anybody remember which one, which organ has this? Yeah, you want to be a little bit more specific than just the bladder, right? What kind of bladder? The gallbladder? Are you talking about the gallbladder? No, it's the urinary bladder. Okay, so we want to be a little bit more specific. Okay, urinary bladder is one. The ureters is another. Ureters are the tubes that go down to the urinary bladder. And you could also say the urethra as well, parts of the urethra. I'll just say the proximal Proximal means closer to the body. Okay. All right. Why don't we take a 5 to 10 minute break, and then we'll come back. And when we come back, we'll go ahead and continue on with the connective tissues, and then the muscle tissues, and so on and so forth. Okay.